everybody, and welcome to the Big Edition Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Today, there's no holiday season in racing, with two big issues on our agenda. Firstly, the quest by Racing New South Wales to send the ATC into administration and the directors' fight to prevent that from happening. Secondly, the pattern, the Australian racing industry's permanent quandary, and the intervention of the Asian Racing Federation. In breeding, Toronado's turnaround, the Perth catalogue release and expectations of 2026, and finally in wagering, changes at PointsBet, stakes horse racing clay, and what we might see in wagering in the new year. Tim, thanks for joining us. It's been a very busy week, surprisingly busy week here at The Straight. We've covered, let's say we covered plenty of ground, but we've covered plenty of ground across two main issues. And we'll start off with the one that probably chronologically that sort of came up on Monday. Probably not overly surprising. We saw Racing New South Wales issue a notice to the ATC to advise them that they would be put into administration. An administrator, Morgan Kelly, I think his name was, would be put in charge, and the board would be relieved of their duties. A committee would be set up in their place to advise the administrator. But, it wasn't over there, was it, Tim? We've seen a week of legal battles, which are ongoing as we speak. And as we talked to you on Friday morning, we still don't know whether the ATC will be in administration or not heading into Christmas. We'll keep an eye on The Straight for all the details there. But take us through, Tim, sort of how the events sort of evolved from your perspective. And I guess, what does it tell us about where things are at between these two key bodies in New South Wales racing?
First of all, there hasn't been it hasn't been very festive, has it? Quite a lot of argy-bargy and quite bitter and angry sort of barbs thrown from both sides. And precedent and history shows that Racing New South Wales have done this, put four previous asked show cause to four previous clubs, and all of them were placed into administration. So the fact that the ATC was put into administration by the Racing New South Wales boards, probably not a surprise. There was a meeting last Friday between the respective boards, ATC and Racing New South Wales, and it came out on Monday morning that that's the decision Racing New South Wales had reached, I believe, again, and ATC directors took it straight to court. And again, that's not a surprise, I don't think. I think they told Racing New South Wales that's what they would be doing if they were placed into administration. There's a lot of legal argument back and forth and an injunction sort that's been in place up until today, and we'll wait and see what happens there. But I guess because it is the biggest club that runs all the tracks in Sydney, it could set a precedent potentially if it goes the other way, right? If it goes ATC's way.
Yeah. I guess so. Getting back to what you're talking about the tone of this wasn't a polite disagreement over strategy. The barbs that were thrown, first of all, like the ATC, obviously the initial notice came from the Racing New South Wales for the ATC. The ATC responded very strongly to, obviously sought the injunction on Monday, initially got it, took Tuesday, then it was due to Thursday and now into Friday. But the ATC put out a statement which was quite strong about where it stood to its members. Racing New South Wales responded by, as you mentioned, dropping in the entire letter that it sent, 5,000-word letter that it sent to the ATC. Now, there were probably aspects of that which arguably maybe should not have got into the public domain, but did. There's debates from the ATC's perspective of whether there's commercial incompetence that matters there. And it just shows, I guess, what's the best way to put it? It just shows how flammable or incendiary this issue's become between the two. And the ATC, are turned to fight. Like when the ATC's statement first came back, there was, I got 4 or 5 text messages like, gloves are off now. Now, this will come down to law, and it will come down to interpretation of the law in front of the justice today, based upon the fact that, look, fundamentally under, I think, Section 14 it is of the Thoroughbred Racing Act, Racing New South Wales has the right to put a club into administration. They're arguing they've got the right to do that. They're doing it in the public interest, and they're doing it to prevent the ATC becoming, to mitigate the risk of the ATC going into insolvency. The ATC's legal argument, for what I heard yesterday, I'm not going to try to predict what the judge might find out, but the ATC's legal argument is that there's two conflicts with that. One's with the Broader Corporations Act, and one's with the Thoroughbred Merger Act, or the Clubs Merger Act that was put forward when the HJC and the STC merged. Now, I'm not going to get into those legalese with this, but what's significant, if the first one, the corporations aspect, is found to be conflicting, that's federal versus state. that would have implications beyond the ATC and to other clubs that might be put into administration, and would question whether Racing New South Wales indeed has the legal right to do what they need to do. I'm not saying they do or they don't. I'm just saying that's part of the argument that's being put forward. So it's a technical legal point that they're arguing on. Look, the likelihood is this will stretch on until well into 2026, and we'll be writing about it for some time to come. But I think from my perspective, Tim, the discussion today, and I said you'll probably find out in the next few hours, will be whether that delay or that time until they actually get to hear this properly, whether the ATC is put into administration in the meantime, or whether the ATC is successful in seeking a stay on that administration. So, I'm not going to have a bet either way on it yet, because I don't know how the legal stuff will wash out today. It's about to start now, but we'll see how that plays out. But no, it's a fascinating situation, Tim, and I think it's a symptom. I don't want to be too. I guess I'm just going to be a little bit careful how I phrase this. But I think in the context of what's happening nationally in Australia at the moment, the environment in Australia, about the racing industry on several levels, and we'll get on the pattern in a minute, is having its own sort of spats or whatever else. I think it shows that how sometimes insular we might be in this industry, and maybe a broader view would be valuable around this stuff. And I'll use that to pivot into the patent stuff at the moment, which is probably less legally complicated because it's not before the Supreme Court to start. But we've seen this coming for a while, Tim, and it was just a matter of what action the Asian Racing Federation would take. You followed this story and covered this story very, very closely, and worked very hard to sort of chase down the details of what's been going on. Again, not totally surprising when the note came out earlier this week that the Asian Racing Federation would use the Asian Patent Committee to take over the Australian black type patent, but not a great day for Australian racing when that happened, Tim.
Just back quickly on the ATC, obviously there's a review into the legislation that Racing New South Wales are using, so that's just another layer of complication on the whole thing. But on the patent, look, as you say, it's not a surprise that the APC, Asian Patent Committee and Asian Racing Federation have stepped in. There's been murmurs coming out of there that that's what they would do, and my opinion, I think they've made the right decision. Something had to happen. Something there needed to be to break this impasse that's going backwards and forwards, and we've spoken ad nauseum at Racing Australia and how powers of veto and how that's made up for months and years about that. But so I think this provides some time for Australia to just the respective PRAs, and we've got this other board or entity, ARIA now, not the music awards, but actually a racing body with some heavy hitters on it, Jonathan Munns and John Massar and Thoroughbred Breeders Australia put their name to it, and Racing Victoria, lots of different people putting forward their own proposal. And I haven't been able to establish this yet, but the query of that is, does the Asian Racing Federation have the power under their constitution to deal with a different entity such as ARIA as opposed to Racing Australia? I have been told, but again, everything's off the record, or you're sort of hearing it third hand, that some of the bodies like CETA have agreed to do that, to deal with another body, but whether if they got challenged in court or whether...
What court would they go to, Tim? What court would they go to? And this is the other question. We're talking about international jurisdictions, and we're talking about things going on. And this is the whole thing. Like, from a legal perspective, it seems to be interpretations of things established across broad continental regions. Like from a legal perspective, it's complete mystery to me how they would resolve this. Like, well, what court do you go to object to this? I mean, you probably could do it within Australia under possibly, I don't know, what does Racing Australia sit under? Like, it probably does summarise the fact that the federated model of Australian racing, which points to a body of Racing Australia, which then points to the ARF, is just it's an odd system. I don't know how you work that out. I mean, yeah. Is there any body that could actually sit over that and rule that? I don't know.
Well, and the ARF, so they've taken it over. They say they'll have decisions in place for upgrades and downgrades, by the start of the season or the start of the season next August. Excuse me, but then how long is that going to take? And talking to Rob Rawson, who's Racing Australia chair and the delegate on APC and ARF for Australia, he told me this week that he thinks there'll be actually a lot more black type races, not fewer, which most people looking at it to go, well, ARF is just going to take the knife to it and we'll go from 600 odd to, I don't know, let's say 500 for for an argument's sake, but that doesn't look like that will be the case. There will be some that have already been identified in letters that have been sent to Racing Australia. So, yeah, watch this space. Again, another topic we'll be writing about for months and possibly years to come, I'd say.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah, hopefully not years, but it does feel, there's that feeling about it. I guess the point is here, Tim, more I look at this patent story and the more I work it out, like it is such an interpretation piece. As a journalist, and, you and I try to establish, we talk to both sides and we try to establish a line in the middle, which is somewhat approximating some mutually agreed facts. I think that there's not a lot of mutually agreed facts here. There's not either whatever side you're on or however you're working on it. I don't think there's a lot of people sitting there saying, "Oh, this is what it should be." And I think this speaks to a broader challenge, Tim, around who controls and owns racing in Australia and who owns a racing program. It's not insignificant that the push for ARIA is led by prominent owners and breeders. Obviously, you've got the state-based organisations across that. Now, if I was the wagering companies, I'd be shaking my head at this and going, can you blokes just please sort it out? Because if you can't sort out your fixture, I mean, every sport in the world sorts out its fixture. The Leongatha District Squash Association works out its fixture. And racing can't work it out. I don't know if there actually is a Leongatha Squash Association. I just made that up. But you know what I mean? Like, it's a fundamental thing you need to work through. And it's, racing, it does speak to broader national dysfunction, but it also speaks to a broader challenge within racing in Australia about, who actually controls the future destiny and what goes on. Previously, for years to come, clubs were self-interested, but also, effectively administrating their own sort of things and sort of fed into a national plan. There's talk about competition law. There's talk about where that sits. That's probably a different challenge about where that might sit. There's so many aspects around this. I just think there's so much unresolved. And like with you, I can see us still talking about this for a while yet, Tim, which hopefully for our listeners' point of view, they're still interested in it, because I know that a lot of people in the industry are just starting to throw their hands up and go, well, what are we doing here? This is not an argument that's going to get us anywhere.
And, obviously Racing New South Wales, the chair, Sarah Ann Cook, came out last month, probably directed at us, suggesting that there was a lot of misinformation out there about the patent and Racing New South Wales' role in that, and they're fair enough to their opinion. But then I've been told, and I haven't cited the letter, but been told the Asian Racing Federation, APC, sent a reply, possibly via Racing Australia, saying, well, no, what you wrote, certainly in part, is incorrect. So, again, a lot of hearsay and where's it at, and we're not taking sides on that or who's right or wrong, but just, again, the actual pure facts are very hard to establish.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of detail there to work through. Like, we'll try our best to interpret that and work that out, but sometimes you just, as a journalist, just got to report what's going on and what you're hearing and what's on the record and what you're able to work through. So we'll do our very best to keep you up to date on it. It'll be going for a while yet. Just a few other quick points on racing. Tim, Dr. Grace Forbes officially left Racing Victoria yesterday. It was announced to staff and then a short announcement for Racing Victoria. Obviously, there's been a settlement in a Fair Work case last week, as I don't think we alluded to actually, because I think that happened on Friday in last week's edition. But yeah, so that matter appears to be settled. Probably a significant moment. Dr. Grace Forbes has been at Racing Victoria for quite a long time. And then just another point on the track I wanted to point to. An interesting feature there from Matt Stewart this morning on Chris Muntz. Obviously, he's someone, the racing industry knows very well through his deeds in the saddle and ups and downs across that, and Group 1 winning jockey who, had a remarkable career, which, as I said, had a bit of a rollercoaster effect about it. Now a Group 1 winning trainer, Cool Archie, his star Colt, who won the JJ Atkins last year and was arguably the best 2-year-old in Australia, although certain people didn't agree with it, has had a setback and be out for the summer by the look of things. There was an interesting chat between Matt and Chris Muntz about that, so I urge you to take a look at that. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. The English Premier Yearling Sale is now... The English Premier Yearling Sale catalogue is now available online. From March 1 to 3, Oaklands Junction in Melbourne once again serves as the focal point of the bloodstock world, with 806 yearlings catalogued across 3 days of selling. This year's catalogue features progeny from 110 individual stallions, including Leading Size, I'm Invincible, Zoostar, Stitzel, Written Tycoon, and Extreme Choice, along with internationally renowned names like Frankel, Kingman, and Lope de Vega. An exciting group of first-season sires is also represented, including Animo, Artorias, Hitotsu, and Jacano. The Premier Sale has consistently produced racetrack success. Graduates include the past 3 winners of the Everest offered at public auction: Bellini Patina, Think About It, and Nature Strip, as well as 34 Group 1 winners since 2018, with 16 purchased for $100,000 or less. The English Premier Yearling Sale runs March 1 to 3 at Oaklands Junction, Melbourne. To view the catalogue, visit english.com.au. All right, Sam, let's have a look at the breeding world now. And we've got an interesting story there about Toronado this week. We wrote earlier this, I think it was in sort of September, that he'd been pulled out of service because of an injury concern. And it looked like he was going to miss the season. But we had a chat with Swettenham Stud during the week, and it's been a great turnaround for him. He's been able to get back into the breeding barn and continue. Like, he's one of the most prolific winner getters in Australia. He's got a great record, a shuttle sire that's had a significant impact. Obviously, he doesn't shuttle Northern Hemisphere anymore. He stays in Australia. But an interesting yarn there, and an interesting sort of, we often talk about sires having setbacks or whatever else. It's nice to see one sort of, fight back.
Yeah, because it was looking hairy there early, and you had an infected hock, and he was pulled just before the start of the season, and then the sort of came public probably a week into the season, and it's again emanating out of just different people suggesting it wasn't looking good at all. But he's made a full recovery and actually ended up serving about 70 mares this year, which is fantastic, just to maintain the momentum. And a lot of breeders have done very well out of Toronado. Obviously successful in Hong Kong. So particularly if you get a colt out of him, he sold $1 million colts this year at the yearling sales, and potentially they could happen again next year, just to his popularity. So it was great to have a chat to Adam Sangster, about that. He's back to full health. There's a photo released this week that went with the story that he looks really healthy and well, and they'll give him a good break before the breeding season again rolls around next September.
Yeah. I think it's important to have those. I mean, he's a really important stallion for Victoria as well. Obviously, we've had Geelong's investment in Victoria, which has been significant, but Toronado has been a great success story, and it's been, it's good to hear he's back on deck. Now, we shoot forward to 2026 pretty quickly, Tim. We're only, 3 weeks away from the start of Magic Millions. Time goes on pretty quickly. There's catalogues already being released. We had the Perth catalogue out this recently, I think earlier this week. We've mentioned before about Inglis has released a suite of catalogues, including a preview of its Easter catalogue. There's lots to look forward in 2026. I mean, anything jump out at you from that Perth catalogue, Tim?
Oh, there's a lot of playing gods, which understandably he's really made his mark over from, standing at 5,000, and now he's sort of 45 plus GST. So he's, I guess you would think he would have commanded pretty much the best mares in WA, and just seems to get good horses, consistent horses that can run at 2, but they're better at 3 and 4 and train on generally. So that Perth sale is unique because of WA is unique in its just isolated nature, and the buyers and trainers are very loyal to that local market with the West Speed bonuses. And I know we've reported there's been angst between the trainers and Rowe and different things, but still it is, I think, a very good place to race a horse. If you get one that can run a little bit, that's locally bred with West Speed, you can get a very good return on your investment, and obviously a lot of fun as well. So I'd suggest, regardless of what happens on the East Coast sales, the top end of that and middle market will be still very strong in Perth.
Yeah. I mean, what are your expectations of 2026 overall, Tim? I mean, looking forward to next year, I mean, is there a vibe or a feeling across the industry, in terms of people trying to sell horses, people trying to buy horses, about what the market might look like?
Look, again, every time we go to January, there's people that are really circumspect, and then others just comes down to personality going, no, it's going to be fine. Again, I think it'll be very similar to this year. Horses that are above the median or will sell very, very well. And, the top end of the market there's still a lot of money flowing around. It's a syndicators market. We'll find it a lot tougher. The My Race horses and micro syndicators probably have taken some of that market share from the 2.5% and 5% owners. That makes it tougher on some of the other trainers and, just syndicating a horse. So that'll make it probably condense that sort of section of the market. But again, I think overall there'll still be a lot of money flowing around. And as you know, to win a race is not easy. To buy a good horse is not easy. So I don't think that's the market. It's just when you get a good one, you'll get rewarded. If you bred a nice horse, you will get well paid.
Yeah, and there's always been that feeling, Tim, that no matter what's going on in the world and what's going on, in the economy and all those types of things, when you rock up to that, that week at Magic Millions early in the new year, there is a wave of optimism, which doesn't seem I don't want to say it doesn't seem rational, but it seems like it's not connected necessarily to what's going on in the rest of the world. I remember like post-COVID and pandemic and all that sort of stuff, there was a little bit of trepidation. But there's still that feeling of people are up there. They're a bit on holidays. There is a sense of it is a really interesting vibe, an interesting way to kick off the season, to be honest, to sort of get that sense of where things sit. And the other thing too, probably Tim to also mention, the sales season next year is actually condensed by a couple of weeks because Easter runs early and Magic Millions runs late. So it's got to be a power-packed sort of 2.5 months of yielding results. We're going to not be able to draw a breath. We'll do our best to keep you up to date with it, but I wonder if that'll have a bit of an impact on things as well. But we kind of don't know. The market is quite dynamic, and the pressures on it are different at every level, aren't they, Tim?
It's a professional market by and large, and people. We've seen the demise of some of those smaller sales, Melbourne Gold and different. That's moved online because it is a professional market. The major stables have agents, or they usually have a lot of staff to get around and see all the horses. So. Yeah, I don't think it'll make a huge impact, but it'll be certainly there'll be a lot of pressure on trainers. Just their time, whether they use agents more next year than normal. That'll be one interesting thing to watch. But I think those that are professional stables, you can't train winners if you don't have horses in the stable, so they'll be buying.
Yeah, fascinating. The following segment is brought to you by Darley. It's been another big spring for Darley Stallions, with their progeny delivering right across the carnival. In total, 38 stakes races were won, everything from those sharp early 2-year-olds through the major Group 1s. And while the Godolphin racing team certainly played their part, it was the client-bred horses who really filled their sheet. They accounted for 26 of those 38 stakes wins. 4 Darley Stallions produced Group 1 winners this spring, spanning from the whole range from 1,200 metres to 2,500 metres. Street Boss, Too Darn Hot, Harry Angel and Goliath all had multiple stakes winners across the carnival. Too Darn Hot's pre-Christmas 2-year-olds were flying again, taking out both the Jim Crack and the Darley Maribon on plate. And Bivouac notched his first Group 1 winner, Baywalked, who broke the track record in the Golden Roads with a rating of 108. Bred well, buy well, win well. Now, finally now in the wagering space, Tim, and just wanted to sort of point to a couple of developments there. Obviously, we're at the end of the year, so things are a little bit quiet, but there's always a few executive changes at this time of year. And we've had changes at PointsBet. Sam Swannell, who has been pretty much the face of PointsBet for its entire journey over the decade, he's been Group CEO since 2016, will be stepping back from that role in February to be replaced by Andrew Catterall, who's been Australian PointsBet CEO, having worked with Cats before. He's quite a dynamic figure, an interesting guy. I think PointsBet's era has now changed with the Mixie ownership. It'll be really interesting to see how that develops. There's been talk about greater focus on social betting and what that looks like. Sam Swannell will remain on the board and also in an advisory role, so the influence will still be there. But it's probably a new era for PointsBet, and maybe and it has been literally a roller coaster. If you look at the way things have gone with their investment into the States and how that went. And at one stage, I think that there was a market capitalisation of this company above $3 billion, Tim. So, which in hindsight, probably was based on expectation, not exactly what could happen. They've got a fairly strong Australian business now really over 5 to 8% of the Australian market share, strong focus on sport, strong leaning towards sport. Yeah, and obviously they were part of that battle this year between Mixie and BetR for control. Mixie won that control battle, but BetR still have 27%, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But interesting going forward to see how that plays out and whether there'll be what the Mixie strategy will be. The combination of I don't want to get too detailed here, but the combination of a Japanese-run company with the management of Andrew Catterall will be fascinating to see how that plays out.
I hear he's getting some professional photos taken for the media, so that'll be interesting as well. Different range.
He did suggest to me. He sent me a text the other day saying he wasn't happy with the photo we used of him. So I said, well, if you want to get a Japanese themed photo, go ahead. And the thought of cats as a manga character probably seems appropriate sometimes. But anyway, he does have some certain superpowers. Moving on now, Tim, and I wanted to sort of chat with this one about you. There was an announcement yesterday from BetMakers that they're partnered with Stake to power Stake.com, which is one of the biggest players in the world, obviously not available in Australia, but to partner with them on their horse racing play. What was interesting for me is that this global tote market and how that might work. Has this got legs? Will this appeal to a global market? If you had a global, let's take the two characters we talked about, Stake and BetMakers, out of it for now. But in theory, does a global tote work? if it goes back to Whirlpool, would it work would it be appealing to a market that like stake, which are people that are used to betting, with fixed odds? Will it work, I guess, Tim? What are your thoughts?
Oh, if there's enough liquidity, definitely. And then dare I say, price is stable. We see with huge pools in Hong Kong, they're still a lot stable because of the big players betting into them. But if there's enough liquidity, and more importantly, if the takeout is reasonable and lower than the general market, so, what's win takeouts 116, 117, or markets 117%, Australian tote, if it's 110 or 112%, if you keep seeing better value there, you'll start betting there. So again, it probably comes down to the takeout rate and just liquidity. I remember years and years and years ago, there was, I think it was Mark Reed, but the Aussie tote or something, it was set up in Norfolk Island, and you'd look at it, but there was no money in the pool. It never grew legs because there's not enough liquidity. But if it's on a global scale, maybe they can pull it off.
Yeah. This is how play it out. If anyone can probably pull it off, it's someone like Stake who have the scale and the audience to do that. What is also interesting, I said, if you can convert that market of, I guess, people who dabble, like, to be honest, they're probably a more crypto-orientated audience, whether they would then sort of be pulled into tote market. And it could be like the tote. I guess the broader question is whether the tote could be a product for racing that helps racing globally. It probably doesn't work in any other markets. So I guess, I don't know. It's one I'll set the world away. Speaking of the tote, I did an article yesterday of what I thought the top 5 the biggest stories on the wagering landscape will be. And the first one I mentioned there was the national tote and Tabcorp sort of play within that. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out next year. We've spoken about it a bit. It'll be good to have a good chat. Hopefully I'll get a chat with either Gil McLaughlin or someone within the Tabcorp ranks early in the new year about sort of how that's progressing and where that's going, and the merits of how that's working. The other points I sort of raised, just scrolling through, whether there be further market consolidation next year, probably raised around the fact that at the bottom end, yes, there will be because, there's people come and go. But in the middle end, Bet are still determined to build their market share. So what that looks like. At the top end, we've got, Sportsbet probably no, Tabcorp probably not quite there yet in terms of building where they are. They've also got the interest in dabble as well. Entain, there are some questions around Entain and where they sit. Andrew Burris has said that they're determined to stay in the Australian market and they're not going to be sold. So I think at this stage, we'll take them on their word. But I think we will see change in 2026 at some level. And then there's the wild card of stake.com and whether EasyGo will try to get into the Australian market or not. So there's some broader things around that. Wagering advertising, I'm not going to talk about that anymore because people are sick of hearing about it, but that will be on the agenda. How does the wagering industry react to the Queensland racing snub? I guess the Queensland boy consumption snub. The wagering industry is pretty unhappy and incensed, or certain sections of the wagering industry are unhappy and incensed about Tim Mander's decision not to drop the pointy consumption tax from 20% to 15%, despite the recommendations of the McGrath review. So interesting one on that. And number one on my list is, I guess, where Entain sits. They're a significant player in the market, I think between sort of 16 and 20% of the digital market. How does that play out going forward? They've got the AusTrack case as well. They've had some strategic changes there. Will 2026 be a year of consolidation or a continued year of change? We'll have to wait and see. So plenty to talk about there, Tim. I guess what happens to the wagering industry then flows back to the racing industry, and all those aspects will shape what happens from a racing perspective as well, Tim.
And as Bren, what we think will happen doesn't necessarily, and it's in some ways very, I'll say, dynamic, and in other ways it's not. So I guess that's why we exist. There's plenty to write about generally. So it'll be another interesting year, that's for sure.
Indeed, it will be. Thanks for listening in 2025, everybody. That's our last edition for now. We might run a couple of specials or a couple of sort of recap stuff over the next couple of weeks to keep you entertained over the festive period. But, in terms of live new comment, we'll probably come back early in 2025 and try 2026 and have a look at the forward to Magic Millions. We'll probably, again, I'm just absolutely confirming the details. We're doing a sort of, a regular update, probably a daily podcast out of the major sales, including Magic Millions and Inglis's major sales as well. So we'll plenty to listen to and plenty to keep up to date with in 2026. Send us an email if you wish to get anything else on the agenda or any guest ideas, or if you want to be a guest, editor@thestraight.com.au. I'd also encourage you to obviously give us a rating and make sure you subscribe to what we're listening to. If you really like what we do, send us a note to let us know, but also to support the Straight through our Straight membership. Obviously, we've introduced a membership platform this year, which, some of our articles on our site are now available only via that membership. So effectively what's known as a paywall. Suggest to have a look at that. There is a discount offer on for early members, which will extend for a $20 discount across $19 a month, or for the yearly discount to be $179 a year. Yeah, I'd encourage you to do that, because I think it's important to support independent journalism, but it's also I think it's worth its while. Like, we put a lot of effort, a lot of research, and a lot of work goes into doing what we do. Some aspects of what we do, like this podcast, will remain free and advertising supported, but other aspects will be, it's important that we continue to grow this business and do what we do best, Tim. And so, we've really enjoyed talking to you this year through Straight Talk. It's a great platform to be able to discuss through the industry of the week. We know a lot of people enjoy this format because they're very busy, and the ability to stick a podcast on and listen to Tim and I prattle on for 45 minutes each week helps them get across the issues. So we hope we're able to do that. And we'll speak to you again in 2026. Thank you very much. Enjoy your festive season, and we'll talk then.